this. Whoa, okay. Whoops. Now I'm not sure what happened. Let me get rid of this. Okay. Now, many of you who know me know when I'm thinking about Southern California and hotter, drier climates, I'm usually thinking of even hotter and even drier. And during much of my time at Rancho, I was focused more on Baja, northwestern Baja, and the adjacent deserts there, and the eastern Mojave. And the reason why is because the floras there are incredibly heat and drought tolerant, but that they also can get rain at any time of the year, so that they're a lot more flexible than certain of our chaparral plants in California. So starting, basically how this is organized is starting with a couple of larger things, small trees, large shrubs. And again, usually if you term things small trees, people are interested. If you call them large shrubs, nobody's interested. So it's...
Bart, let me cut in. Could you hit slideshow again? Because what we're seeing is, we're seeing your slide, but we're also seeing the side parts to it.
Oh, really? I'm not seeing that at all. Okay, I think I might have to exit then. Stop sharing for a minute. And let me do this again. Oh, shoot. Is that better or not?
It's
or is that
non-existent.
Oh, okay. All righty. Well, then I have to exit. Okay, come on. Okay. Then I need to get rid of this that was telling me I was being recorded.
Yeah.
I think that's what did it.
Yeah.
And now I'm restarting the talk. Should come right up. Okay, from the beginning. Whoops, damn. I need to escape. All right. Sorry. Okay, now I will start screen sharing. And then I will go from the beginning. Okay.
There you go.
Good, good.
Okay, sorry about that. So what I wanted to start with was two ashes, but I don't have good photos of the other one. Fraxenos perrii is the former Fraxenos trifoliata from Baja, California. There are reports of one or two in San Diego County, but it's principally a Baja plant. It's in look, it's very much like Fraxenos dipetala, our chaparral ash, except that, again, it tolerates even hotter and drier conditions. The other thing I like about it is that, well, if you grow them from seed, you do get a variety of habits. This is one at Rancho that was always just tall and narrow, and I believe it's still there. That's about 15 feet high, but not much more than that. And again, in early spring, they flower with those showy white blossoms for, oh, I don't know. Usually, it depends. If it gets hot, they don't last long at all. The other species that I wanted to show was Fraxenos anomala from the eastern Mojave. And interestingly, I have, 6 of them coming along up here from seed. It's a very odd for an ash for a number of reasons, but the thing that's most perplexing about it to me is that even though it's from the eastern Mojave and the Clark Mountains, where it's very hot and very, very dry, but it occurs in a cool-ish canyon, the plants that I'm growing just don't produce roots. I've had them now for what, 2 years, and that I just potted them up into larger, deeper containers, and there was just stringy few roots. The plants are very happy; they're growing quite a bit, but it's surprising how un-ash-like it is. With its root system, and it's not voracious and just growing out of control like most ashes do. Fraxenos perii is also well behaved in that regard. Both are deciduous, so you can get summer sun or summer shade and winter sun. Good plants. A plant that many people think of as a small tree, but I usually think of it as a large shrub, is just Styrax Red Aviva. This is here in our Botanic Garden, and one of the plants in our quote-unquote desert or Southern California section. It's always been one of the best bloomers in the garden. It's in full sun at all times, and it stays green until the leaves fall in usually October sometime, sometimes November. It's very showy blossoms, lightly fragrant, fairly large seeds that are poisonous. It can be pruned to open it up a little bit. Some of the plants at Rancho had enormous leaves that I never really liked. All of our plants here at the Botanic Garden, and they're from Southern California, from the North Coast Range, and the Sierra foothills, all have very small leaves, which is much more attractive to display those flowers. The flowers usually occur in pairs, sometimes threes, sometimes fours, and are fairly waxy and will fall and create a carpet of white underneath the plant. The fall color can be a bit yellowish, but not necessarily. They're oftentimes slow to get going, but worth the wait. Very long-lived. Another plant that we grew successfully at Rancho, just one clone of it, but here now we have several. Mortonia utahensis in the Celostraceae, also from the eastern Mojave. It's usually found on limestone and usually in full hot sun. The leaves, as you can see in the detail here, are small and kind of rough textured and are in that perpendicular to each other, decussate growth habit or arrangement of leaves. And the flowers are small and white. Ours are currently flowering right now in these small spike-like arrangements. And they do have whitish bark as they get old. They don't get big. This is actually a smaller shrub. Usually they're up to maybe 4 or 5 feet, occasionally taller, but that's rare. At Rancho, pretty much all of them were 4 feet or under. Ours here are fairly young and are just like, I don't know, maybe 6 inches tall. But there are a number of them and all of them seem to be doing well. Encelias. Encelias here at the Botanic Garden were never grown because it was too cold. Climate change is definitely a real thing. In the foreground there, the deep yellow is Encelia farinosa. I mean, you can't ask for more. Silver foliage, profuse flowering over a long period of time. In back of it is Carol's selection of Encelia Californica, paleo yellow, from the La Brea Tar Pits garden there.
No, the Natural History Museum, Nature Gardens.
Oh, I thought that that's why you named it paleo, it was from that site.
No, we named it Paleo in honor of the paleontology research program at the Natural History Museum, which encompasses the tar pits, but the plant came from the Nature Gardens. The seedling in the Nature Gardens.
Yeah, at Rancho, there were a lot of those that had this kind of creamy color, but we never got around to selecting one and propagating it. In the foreground, this whole sweep of plant here, and it's actually just two individuals, is Eriogonum umbulatum variety Munzii from the San Gabriel Mountains. It's a very easy growable, long season of interest. The flowers age to sort of that rust color and then drop off pretty cleanly. Don't really have to do a lot of maintenance. There are actually two paleo yellows there. One of them we just cut back because it finished its spring wave of flowering. So we cut it back hard, so it's only like 8 inches by 8 inches. And if it gets a little bit of water, it'll come back and flower yet again. The farinosa, I think we're probably just going to deadhead it and let it be rather than cutting it back this year. It's one that we actually got as a collection of a seedling that had just one pair of real leaves beyond the cotyledon that was in a roadbed across a wash. So it seemed like something that was collectible. And yes, we had permits. Normally we just take cuttings of such things, and that actually the Mortonias are from cuttings, as are most of the things you'll see. The Eriogonum was grown from seed. I could and have done whole talks on salvias. I only have one in this talk, and this is it. Salvia Chanapeplica. And I'm seeing this bar across the top here. Do you guys actually see that or not? I'm guessing not.
No, I don't see.
No bar.
Oh, okay, good. So you actually see the name Salvia Chanapeplica. All I see is Chanapeplica. So anyway, that's here in the Botanic Garden. It had never been grown up here. It flowers for months up here. In Southern California, it's early spring, and then it's done for the year. Very reminiscent of Salvia Leucophila, and it's actually a relative of it, although the individual flowers are much larger, and the verticillasters or whorls of flowers are also bigger than almost all pure Salvia Leucophila. This particular shrub is about, maybe 4 feet tall and about 6 feet across. It hasn't been pruned back at all. It should have been the first year, but we just didn't know how hardy it would be up here, and didn't want to cut things back too hard. Again, sort of ironically, when I arrived up here in 2013 in December, my first days on the job were during an incredible cold snap up here, and there was hoarfrost on everything. So there were ice crystals that were sometimes nearly 3/4 of an inch long on many of the plants. We've not gotten anywhere near that cold since. And then there are a few things that I wanted to put in just because, again, I like them and they're really easy to grow. I should mention that the Salvia Chanapeplica is very easy to grow. All you really need to do is with a real young plant is be sure to pinch it a few times when it's little to make it branch more, because all salvias tend to, or all of our native salvias, except for Spathacia, tend to be a bit brittle. Salvia Schoners nucana was actually bred by someone at Santa Clara University and the mission, a priest, I believe, in the 1930s. He crossed Rosa nucana, one of our native wood roses, and a hybrid tea rose, and this is the result. At Rancho, this plant did famously. It's around the edge of the cultivar garden in a few locations, and it does, the real nice things about it are that the flowers are enormous. You can see those are 1 gallon containers by it, and a single flower is about the diameter of a 1 gallon can. There are very few to no thorns. You see one on this one, but that's uncommon. And that it does send out a little bit of runners, but at Rancho, they never really did anything much other than they made additional canes. The canes are fairly long, up to about 8 feet, but they usually kind of arch. I know you can do a lot of pruning to it, although at Rancho we never did. I've just got cuttings of this a couple of years ago when I was at Rancho, and that they're coming right along here. Haven't decided if I'm planting them out here or taking them home and propagating them here for plant sales. We typically don't do garden hybrids. Another rose, believe it or not, this is a clone, and that is the same plant, just different years, different individual flowers. Rosaminutifolia is pretty much a Baja California endemic. There was one clonal plant in San Diego County that was native that is now a car dealership. And that that plant was propagated and is planted in a few areas, but there is no longer a native occurrence of Rosaminutifolia in California at this point. The interesting thing about Pure Bee, and it was named after B. Beck, the Rancho Santa Ana longtime librarian, who was quite a rosarian. And so she was delighted to have a rose named after her. Usually the rose is deep pink. Albinos are known, but the interesting thing is that in some years and some conditions, it does this red-pink flaring at the base of the petals. As you can see, the one on the left, there's no trace of red whatsoever. And again, it just varies from year to year. Rosaminutifolia is extremely drought tolerant. It can take some water or no water once it's established. It typically grows along the coastal plains on those kind of stair-stepped tabletops, traveling up from the ocean. And that, as you can see in this photo, that arching stem is very characteristic. And in Baja, those will touch the ground, they'll root, and then keep going and keep going and keep going, and are major trip hazards when you're trekking around on those areas. And you can see there's tons of spines as well, or thorns. But beautiful little tiny leaves and very ephemeral flowers in spring. Easy to grow once you get it. the species and the cultivar. And another one that is just straight species from Monterey County, Rosa Pineatorium Beatrice Howitt. This one, the flower color is nearly identical to Schoner's nucana, except that this is more typical wild rose size flower. So again, about the size of a 50-cent piece, although, you know, who sees those anymore? And that the plant usually gets to be about knee high, sometimes a bit taller, a little bit arching. This one usually is at its best in hotter Southern California locations in partial or afternoon shade. It also does attractive rose hips. The thing I forgot to mention is that Schoner's nucana has large, showy rose hips that are almost the size of your last segment of your thumb, and about that, just about the size of mine. And they start out yellowish and then they get sort of salmon color and so on. They're very popular with birds very late in the season. These rose hips are much smaller and usually get eaten whole. Another plant that actually more of a small shrub that straddles the border with probably about 50-50 Baja versus Southern California, Neorydium dumosum or bush rue. It's in the citrus family, and some people are allergic to it, to the foliage, much like some people are allergic to citrus. The thing I like about it is that it is bright green, and it does have very interesting flowers. They're citrus-like, they're citrus fragrant. This is it in our Botanic Garden. Well, so was the last one. But you can see the flower buds are showy pink, and then as they open, they're pure white. The plant is pretty much evergreen. It can lose a lot of foliage in extreme drought and still be fine if it's well established. The plants don't usually get much taller than about 3-4 feet. So again, a good size for many smaller gardens. The fruits also look like little teeny tiny citruses or citrus fruits, almost a little bit bigger than the flower buds here, and that they can be almost the same color. Don't have a picture, but they also have those glands in the fruit skin, so the relationship to citrus is very clear. It's a really pretty thing, and it's very fragrant. This year, ours bloomed in February. Another Baja endemic from just near San Vicente in Arroyo Hediondo, which is a very deep canyon, and it's only in a portion of the canyon, and it grows with Xylococcus bicolor, or the mission manzanita. And in the wild, it's hard to differentiate this from that. Of course, in cultivation, and particularly up here, it's a lot more lush looking, and you would never mistake it for Xylococcus. But in the field, it really does look like Xylococcus. The flowers are very aromatic and smell like chocolate. This is a very unusual plant. Not only is it incredibly rare, but the recent taxonomic and molecular work that have been done on it show that it's not a berberis and it's not a mahonia either. And so it's been put into a new genus, Moranothamnus, after Reed Moran of San Diego Natural History Museum botanist who did so much of the early field work in Baja California. He virtually got everywhere. He died maybe 10 years ago. at a very advanced age. The plant is really quite attractive. Our plant here at the Botanic Garden is, I believe now, the biggest one, and it's only been in the ground since 2014. And it's about 3.5 feet and about maybe 2 feet wide. Again, a real good size for a smaller garden. And the fruits are kind of the typical Mahonia color, so the blue-black, not like the desert sorts that are now also in a different genus as well. You can never have enough buckwheats, and there's so many. And this is one that I'd always wanted to grow, but getting material of it is difficult because it's state and I believe also federally listed. This is Eriogonum grande variety tumorum. Most of us know and have grown Eriogonum grande variety rubescens from Santa Rosa and Santa Cruz Island. This is from San Nicolas Island. And again, it's just a gorgeous plant. You can see the size of it. It's not all that tall. It's usually less than knee high. And yet it does these broad inflorescences that, again, very attractive, usually covered with insects. This I took in the evening, so they were all gone. But during the day, it's just loaded like all buckwheats are. The foliage there, you can see a little bit of it exposed here. It's small and gray. So even when it's not in flower, it's attractive. The flowers do turn that typical rust color. Interestingly, all of these right here are seedlings that came up on their own. Many of them didn't make it, but it's obviously one that it's rare and endangered in its habitat, but it is not a difficult plant to grow. If you're in an area that freezes hard, you probably won't be able to grow it, but otherwise, full sun, not even especially great drainage. The plants just seem to do well here. Can't talk about it at Rancho because we never could get it. Liz Bittner, our the Botanic Garden's supervisor, and the gardener for, and she is also the gardener for our Channel Islands section, was able to get it from some national park personnel. Another one that's widely grown and very familiar to most of you is Eriogonum crocatum, the saffron buckwheat. It's here at our Botanic Garden, they get especially large. I mean, they're very, very long lived. At Rancho, they didn't live as long, anywhere near as long as they do up here. And in most gardens, they don't seem to be. I'm guessing they probably get too much water in many gardens. But they even can seed around limitedly here in our garden. The other plant that I just never have good pictures of, but that's it over here. This is Dynandra Menthornii, one of the perennial tarweeds. And as you can see, it's still in bud when the buckwheat is reaching full bloom. So the tarweed will flower starting sometime late this month and going through October. And is a wonderful plant for gardens because it always is that nice sort of piney green. But Eriogonum crocatum is also state listed, but it's been in cultivation forever, so everyone's got it or can get it. Beautiful silver foliage. The flower buds have this rusty red in them. This is just seedlings of Erythronium Multiscopium that came up by it. But just to show you some younger plants and at different phases. The one on the left is in full bloom, the one on the right is in bud. Easy, long-lived, not too much water. This one is always been one of my favorite plants, and this is it in the wild. And I'm wondering if any of you recognize it. It's only known from, I believe, 2 places, one in Nevada and one in California. We do have this here at the garden, and it's planted out, and it actually has flowered. You'll see it in the next image, again in the wild and identified. This is it right here. Glossopetalon pungens variety glabra. And variety glabra, if recognized, is only in California and only in the Clark Mountains. And then the Petrophyton cespitosa, or the rock spirea, is much more widespread. We have large plants of it here in the Botanic Garden, and just grew some from seed that have been planted in the new crevice garden. And Michael Euler has just gotten some seeds of the recently accepted and described variety acuminata from the High Sierra. So that hopefully will be joining our collection shortly. But I always like this plant because of its growth habit. It is only typically about 1 inch, maybe 2 inches high off of the limestone, and it's oftentimes on these vertical limestone faces, and it's always north facing. It's a plant that it can take heat, but it doesn't want hot soil, and it doesn't want sun. It doesn't want full sun in Southern California. We also grew this at Rancho, but we kept it as a nursery collection because we really didn't have a place to plant it out. I don't believe it exists there currently. And just to give you an idea of what else it grows with, that's a kind of serious mojavensis, the Cleric Cactus with the bright red flowers. And that also just gives you an idea of the flowers. Many of you probably would think that perhaps this is in Rosaceae, but it isn't. It's actually in the Crossosoma family, so the Crossosomataceae. It's just a close-up of it. And again, blue-green foliage on the older growth, and then bright green on new growth. And the plants that we have are now, biggest ones are about 3 inches by 3 inches. It's slow growing. It's the perfect rock garden plant. And then Dudleya Simosa. This is actually in our new crevice garden, this photo. So it's one of Mike Euler's collection from the Sierra, and again in the crevice garden that he built for us here with 2 other Park District staff. Some of those pieces of slate are about, the biggest ones are about 7 feet by 4 or 5 feet. Really large pieces. Needed large scale heavy equipment to put them in, but it's a beautiful display. I'm sure at some point can share a lot of photos of just that project, but this is the only one you'll see today. Another one of those sort of rock gardens. Oh, well, actually, I should back up for a second. Dudleya Simosa is one of the more colorful, smaller Dudleyas. There are a lot of different populations of it that have redder or yellower or oranger flowers. They typically do have a lot of red in the foliage, as well as the chalkiness on the new growth. And these plants here are only about maybe 3 inches in diameter or smaller, and about 3 or 4 inches in height. Hummingbird pollinated. Lots of people that aren't successful with them either water them too much or not at all. If you water them not at all and they're established, they'll very much dry up in the summer, but usually they'll be fine. If they're not established, they might dry up and just dry up. If you water them too much, you'll rot them out in the summer. It's kind of interesting that they're very similar in appearance to echeverias from Mexico, but they're diametrically opposite. It's echeverias want dry winters and wet summers, and Dudleyas want wet winters and dry summers. So it is very, very, very rare to see the 2 genera growing together in a garden, unless it's something like this, where you have a crevice with a winter grower next to a crevice that's not connected in any way, shape, or form, but gets water in the summer. Easy plants. An interesting plant that here staff at the Botanic Garden here have been trying to grow for a number of years and never have been successful. And that it was, you could get the seeds to germinate, but then they would be about the size of 2 pinheads, and then they'd go dormant for winter and would never come back. When we redid the glass house here, we added lights, grow lights. And so a lot of things that behave like that, like a lot of our native gentians and swirtias and so forth, as well as Epilobium rigidum, are now able to be successfully grown. It really is just keeping them growing longer, and then when they do go dormant, they are big enough to come back. This is one of the, or that first one is actually in the glass house flowering. So is this one, is another individual. And then this is a different individual planted out in the garden, where this one's flowers never really open flat. Don't know why, just what it does. But you can see all those flower buds. It's a very happy plant. And then the other one that's the biggest one is this one. And again, just a wonderful, wonderful addition to either a trough garden, a rock garden. This again is just planted out in the serpentine bed here at the Botanic Garden. The plant itself, we've kind of transitioned with this plant to a number of northern plants. This is actually from the Klamath Range up in the northwest of California. It's endemic to that area. Very, very pretty plant. We've actually been able to grow it from cuttings now too. Erythroniums. I've gotten very interested in erythroniums lately for a variety of reasons. They're one of those plants that comes into flower very early in the year. They're usually very reliable, and that some of them will tolerate the heat of Southern California. This is the one that can and does. Erythronium Multiscopium. Either this or the so-called Cliftonii form of it are heat tolerant, as long as they're insulated roots or bulbs. They will not take hot soil. So if you grow them in the shade, and we did at Rancho, we kept them in the nursery for quite a number of years. Every year I would think that they wouldn't come back, and then they did. This is them here in our garden in a container early on, showing the beautiful leaves, as well as the buds have interesting colors in them that the flowers themselves do not. Same pot a little bit later when almost all of it's in flower. We have these out in the garden in a number of locations too. If you have snails and slugs, it's a problem. We don't have very many of either, although banana slugs will wander in from adjacent parts of Tilden, and we have to do them in. Another one that's actually naturalized here in the garden is Aerothronium Revolutum, the sort of pinkish or purplish one. Again, beautiful, beautiful leaves. This is planted underneath a vine maple and Cercocarpus betuloides macrourus, the large-leafed birch-leaved mountain mahogany. And that Joe Dahl, who got this collection started, once it's finished blooming and the capsules have formed, which are rigidly erect, he would come through and just dust the whole area with small lava rock and our planted potting soil. And then the seeds would fall in or fall into that and fall into the crevices and then would get going. And now we have literally hundreds and hundreds of them in the areas that he treated that way. If you don't, then usually the seeds will blow away or birds will eat them or other things happen. But these plants, erythroniums in general, like most of our fritillarias, are adapted to growing before the leaves of the surrounding deciduous plants come into full leaf. So they take maximum advantage of early spring bright light, and then they go dormant before the heat of the summer. And as long as the soil is not overheated, they seem to be very readily and easily grown. Just beautiful, beautiful plants. They'll last for about a month or so total. This is a newly described species. It was only described, I think, about 5 years ago. But then we were growing this collection as an unidentified erythronium that Steve Edwards had collected in seed from Shasta County, and that it flowered this year, and I was able to easily key it out to this new species, Shastense, which is very rare and localized. Just a gorgeous plant. These are now planted out in the garden. The thing is that Steve collected it, I think, in 2012. So it had been growing in the nursery back at the glass house since then, and we planted it out last fall before we knew what it was, because it hadn't bloomed, but I knew that they were big enough to. Anyway, it's very exciting to have something like that that then ends up being a very rare plant as well as a new species. And it's, again, a beautiful plant. Erythronium White Beauty is thought to be a form of Californicum, and that means that it's very similar to Multiscopidium, but that there can be more than one flower on an inflorescence. This particular one does not exhibit that this year, but again, with those beautiful mottled leaves. Not all of our erythroniums do have mottled leaves, but many of them do. tuolamensis and its cultivar pagoda. Pagoda being another one that's very garden adaptable to Southern California. Again, as long as you don't let it overheat or the soil overheat and you keep it shaded. But this is also growing with federally listed Delphinium bakeri, which is limited to about, well, what is it, less than 1/10 of a mile of roadside in Sonoma County, and that's it. UC Berkeley and our garden have been growing it for years, and UC Berkeley has actually been involved with repatriating plants to new populations in that area. It's actually a very showy delphinium. Delphiniums, we're now growing quite a number of them. As long as you can keep them dry in the summer and you can keep pests away from them, principal pests, snails and slugs, lesser extent earwigs, but those are probably the 3 worst things right there. And overwatering in the summer is a definite immediate killer. They'll rot out. But we've had these plants of Delphinium bakeri and Delphinium luteum in the background there for what, probably 15 years, these individuals, and then they're also seeding and coming up by themselves in this particular bulb bed and in that area with that Erythronium, which is backed by our nursery annex. Again, they're beautiful plants. This is also state and federally listed from Bodega Bay, and a very attractive hummingbird pollinated, as well as bees. And near the base of it there, that pink is Leucophila Red Aviva, or bitterroot, another spring ephemeral. All of these things just go completely dormant and we don't water them at all until late fall. Easy to grow otherwise. This is in the same bed with them, Dodecathion Clevelandii insulare. It's, well, and now it's a primula, although I really detest that. So I still call it Dodecathion, kind of in protest. Shooting stars are wonderful little plants, although Clevelandii insulare is pretty chunky and can get to be well over 1 foot in height. It is a classic spring ephemeral. The leaves will come up in winter, they'll flower in February and then go away by this time of year. Now the leaves are all dried up, except for some that we're growing in the nursery. That's actually Fritillaria biflora right there, giving you an idea. It's early spring, like February. We noticed that this year, because there's so many of them in this bed, there are probably over 100 now, that some of them have very large flowers compared to others. So this was one of the ones with giant flowers. So we collected seeds of this for future plant sales. And then this is the form of the plant from Guadalupe Island that I collected the seeds on an expedition there in 2010, I think it was. And that when I came up here, I had a packet from the Rancho seed bank with 100 seeds in it, and 99 of them came up. And that the first one to bloom, or the first several to bloom, were pure white like this, with, and it's kind of an interesting blue purple on these these things at the base of the flower that usually appear to be black, but on these white ones, if you look at that closely, it actually is that blue purple. These plants are a lot larger than the usual Clevelandii insulares. Easily the foliage from edge to edge of the rosette can easily be over a foot, sometimes considerably more, and that they flower for a long period of time. You can see all the buds in there, and they're very leafy bracted. These again are easy. You can grow them in fairly small pots, and then just when they're done, put them away where you're not going to water them or nothing will get in and eat the little, well, root stock. Because again, snails and slugs and even birds will eat the foliage when they're hungry. Spring ephemeral, easy. Then I have a couple of just oddball things that are kind of in between that I just wanted to include. And this is Silene Californica. It is an amazing plant. I did a large seed collection from a small population and up in the Klamath range, and expected that we wouldn't end up with that many, and we ended up with like 150 2-inch plants. And Ben Anderson, our gardener for this collection, or for the Shasta Klamath part of the garden, planted out lots of them in all kinds of different conditions, and they've just taken off kind of everywhere. Hummingbird pollinated. This plant, even these big ones, are usually only about 4 to 6 inches high, occasionally a little bit higher, and then they just kind of spread out. Unlike the laciniatas in Southern California, which can be huge and very lanky and brittle, these are a lot more durable plants, much more leafy. And so concurrently, many more flowers. Again, seems to be easy. This is a fairly new addition to the current garden. I'm sure that they've been grown here many times before. We have laciniata in the Channel Islands section, but Californica hadn't been here for a little while. We're also growing a number of other Silenes that I didn't include, like Campanularia and Parishii from Southern California, from the Santa Rosa Mountains in the desert, as well as some other interesting ones. And I couldn't do a talk about my favorite plants and some of the more durable things and not mention at least one heuchera. So this is it, Heuchera Wendy from Rancho Santa Ana, John Durley selection. Just one of the best of the Rancho heucheras. It flowers freely, oftentimes reblooms. It's not the one with the densest foliage, but once they get in and established, they just they do fill in and really are outstanding when massed. The inflorescences come up about 2 feet, sometimes more. Wonderful plant for masses. Dry shade in the summer. You do need to keep them a little bit watered if you want them to look better, although established plants can get by with a lot less than people think. Although again, in a drought like we've had, this will want water. And then 2 things that do want water are Epipactis gigantea serpentine night, the chatterbox orchid that Roger selected from the cedars in Sonoma County, a serpentine area. This is a planting of it here in the Botanic Garden that has probably been in the ground for just like 3 years. It's very happy where it is. This is what it looked like just a week ago. It's still in full bloom. The foliage, when it emerges, is really dark, dark purple, and then it gets a little bit of greener as the season goes on, and then it dies completely to the ground for winter. Easy plant to grow in containers or in the ground. It just needs some water, as does what's in the background. And these are just gigantic Aquilegia Formosa. Again, very, very easy to grow perennial plant that, if happy, will seed around. And I don't believe we even planted these here. They just sort of moved there from somewhere else in the garden, and they're so nice that they've been left. You just cut them back lightly shortly after they've bloomed, or if you want them to seed around, you just let the follicles ripen and shake them around where you want them. And they don't have to be in water at all times, but they do best with water. And then just a couple of annuals. Almost all species Clarkias are worth growing. This one's from the Sierra foothills and is somewhat rare, but it's spectacular. And in most years, we have an excellent display of them here at the Botanic Garden, where they just naturalize in the Sierran section. But because of the drought, it's going to be a very bad display this year. This is what it looked like last year. The plants are about, again, a foot to 18 inches in height. They've got that nice red center surrounded by white, and then that classic Clarkia pink. And don't need to do much with Clarkias. Clarkias also are excellent cut flowers. And if you cut them before they set any seed and water them, they'll rebloom. And then another Clarkia from the Sierran section, Clarkia Dudliana. Again, from more southern Sierra, more than northern Sierra, and again, foothills, and into the San Gabriels and other places in Southern California. This is just a particularly nice selection of it, or seed strain. It wasn't really anything deliberate other than a collection Michael made, and he tends to make nice collections. This has been in the garden for years and always does well. It usually, or it can be grown in partial shade or full sun. It seems to be very adaptable. And then I wanted to close with lilies, because again, lilies are sort of a special thing. Some are incredibly easy, some are very difficult. Our Botanic Garden has a very long history of them, especially due to Wayne Roderick, and that we have most of California's lilies in cultivation here. This is always the first one to bloom, Columbiana, and it usually starts sometime in May. It wants generally partial shade. You see it up north. All of these photos are here in the garden of all these lilies. This is back by the gardener's office in the rainforest section. So again, cooler soils with the tops of them in bright light to sun. And again, some of these plants get quite large and showy. Some remain small. Some only do one flower a year and just keep coming back one flower a year. You really never know what you're going to get with them until they're up and mature. They're easy to grow from seed in most cases. All of ours in the garden are grown from seed. And then once we have them, we have scaled them where you kind of peel off some of the bulb scales and get them started. We've done that with Callogii, with some hybrid ones that have come up in the garden. Callogii, and of course, any of the Pardalinum sorts. The Columbianas are usually yellow, but then occasionally they're this orange as well. Pardalinum shastensi. These have larger flowers and are oftentimes larger plants and more flowers per stem than typical Pardalinums. Easy to grow for us, single flower. Or Giganteum, a lot of debate about the origin of this plant and what it really is. I don't think anyone's really got a firm handle on it. It's been named as a species, Harrisonianum. It's been named as a variety of Pardalinum, botanical variety Giganteum, and it's also been named a cultivar Giganteum, which seems to be the best place for it, in my mind. It just is bigger in all respects than any other Pardalinum. Just straight Pardalinum itself is an incredible plant. This next series of photos are all of one large pot that you'll eventually see the pot. And it's from Lily Springs here in Tilden Park. It was a collection that Steve Edwards made quite a number of years ago, and that it's now no longer there at Lily Springs because there's so many deer here. They ate them all, and then the spring itself got choked over with Himalayan blackberry. But we have it here in the garden, and it is spectacular. That again is all coming from one pot and many stems. This is probably, since I've been here, we've divided this pot 3 times, and we're going to have to do it, I think, this year or next year as well. Pardalinum itself rarely has lots of flowers per stem, and this is no exception. It's usually 1 to 3. There's the pot, and it's by the entrance to the visitor center. So it's not a huge pot. Again, it gets watered regularly because it's in a pot. Lilium Humboldtii, subspecies oscillatum, is one of the easiest lilies to grow, and you don't have to water it a lot. It's native to Southern California only. The actual Lilium Humboldtii from the Sierra foothills is not a terribly easy species to grow. We do have it, and it flowered very nicely last year, and it looks like it is taking this year off from flowering. But these Humboldtii bloom for us every year, some years better than others. Last year was exceptional, and this is last year. This one stem had 29 buds on it, and all of them did eventually open. It's right by a path, and so everyone thinks that it's just something that came up, but pretty sure this one was a planted individual. They do come up from seed all over the east half of the garden, just kind of randomly. This is the main planting of them coming into bloom. And there again, you can see that one stem has a tremendous number of buds. This part is fairly shady, and they're always arching over to get into more sun. But they always do really well there. And then there's this hybrid that came up in full sun in our desert section that's actually a hybrid between Pardalinum and Humboldtii oscillatum. You can see that it doesn't have any of the red tips of Pardalinum, but what it does have is the clumping nature of the stems. Usually Humboldtii will just have one stem, occasionally two, rarely three, but this thing has lots, and it just displays hybrid vigor. Lots of buds, lots of flowers, really nice plant. Theo, who was the gardener for our Southern California section until February of this year, when he left the area, he and his wife and family moved to Nevada City in the Sierra foothills, and bought a house there because they felt they really couldn't afford to live and have the family and lifestyle that they wanted here in the Bay Area because it's so expensive. But this, I had Theo dig and scale this plant to see how easy it would be, and he did, and we've ended up with probably close to 100 of these. Didn't think it would be that easy, but again, hybrid vigor and timing. It was all done in December, 2 years ago. So the plants are now all saleable size. If we have a plant sale, it will be in it. I just like that image because what you're really looking at is the shadow. I'm looking straight down on Lillian Kelloggia, which is one of our more unusual lilies. It's not the easiest one to grow. It's found in the Northwest in the Klamath Range. Pink flowers, sometimes with yellow bands on the petals, sometimes not. Sometimes very pale pink, sometimes very deep pink. Incredibly fragrant. Again, these plants that I'm showing you are all here in the garden, grown from seed. One of those small ones, like I mentioned, sometimes they'll come up year after year, but just do one flower. Who knows why? Seems happy enough. And there's a dark pink one in another pot by that Lilium pardalinum from Lily Springs. And that is, I believe, the last shot. Yes. So if you want to look at that, or you want to look at that, we can end there. But thank you for your attention, those of you who stuck around. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And I'll exit the stop screen share.
There we go. So Bart, can you click on to the chat and we'll see if we can get questions in that direction?
Ooh, I see
they queue up a bit.
3 things in chat.
So far, I've got to tell you, a bunch of people like Ron Vanderhoff, Bob Allen, a few others have been carrying the load for you there during the, but now any new questions, we'll let you take them.
Okay.
So go ahead, people. Do you have any new sections of the garden that you want to build up or try?
Well, I mean, since I've been here, we've done what, 2 really big projects as far as sort of either new or redos. When I got here in the winter of 2013, the garden had just been awarded a $90,000 grant from the Bonita Garden Club, which is in in Piedmont, formerly in Piedmont. they were kind of disbanding and they had a lot of assets, and that they asked the garden what they would like money for. And that Don Fuller, the gardener for Southern California section, and Steve Edwards decided that a major redo of that area would be extremely beneficial. So Steve and Don wrote up a grant proposal, and it was fully funded. And the work was done, principally all of the rock work and putting all the soil in was done by Phil Johnson. Some of you probably know him. He's a very eminent garden designer and expert at rock work. And this was his kind of grand finale. When he finished this, he retired. Or when he and his crew finished this, there was a lot of heavy machinery. A lot of the beds were excavated deeply. The one by the fence, where a lot of the Southern California collections and desert collections in particular are located. Some of those areas, the soil mix that we selected and designed and manufactured for that area is 8 feet deep. Much of it is 4 to 6 feet. And it's all designed to drain underground, because again, we're here in a canyon, so everything is naturally sloped. And so even our horrendous clay soils that are still kind of in roughly original condition almost, generally sheet flow off pretty well. Phil did what's now the Baja California bed, which is the small bed to the east side of the visitor center. The huge bed from almost the front entry gate to the east shed. He did 2 huge beds there. And then east of the east shed, he had done something in, I think it was around 2008. And he continued that all the way to the Channel Island section. So that was all constructed in 2014, 15, and then planted every year since. And then the crevice garden we started, in 2019, and did the first piece of it. People have asked about, where's the plan for that? How did you do this? And it was, the plan I did in probably less than a minute. It was 3 ovals. And then discussed it with Mike Euler, and I'd arranged for Michael to visit Denver Botanic Garden, Pineatorium and the staff there, where there are outstanding rock gardens and crevice gardens. Denver is sort of ground central for that idea in North America. And he did that probably 5 years ago, I'm guessing. And then he went back a couple of times on his own. And then we decided we were ready to do it here, and that our friends group said they'd pay for all the rocks. I forget, it's something like, I remember the amount that was budgeted for just the big slabs of rock was $60,000. And if any of you are friends of the garden, in the winter 2019 issue of Manzanita, it's quantified as far as what the tonnage of rock was, what the tonnage of the expanded shale, how much sand is actually at the bottom, and so on. And then Michael has been doing detail work on it since, again, the first piece, the first small oval on the north end was done in summer of 2019. Summer of 2020, the big piece and the third piece were done. We thought it was going to take 3 years to 1 year to do each piece, but both Michael and the two other Park District staff involved with the project decided that, yeah, they could finish it all in, or the second and third pieces in the month of July last year, and they did. It's really a phenomenal piece of work, both as sort of a design piece and an artistic piece. And three of them, Rodney Smith and, oh shoot, I'm forgetting the third guy's name. I should pull the
we're good. We're good. Okay.
Is right behind me.
Don't worry, Bart.
Okay.
Because we have one short question after this, and I think we're ready to finish up, from Alan. And he asked, do you have any Bolander's lily in the garden?
Yes. Actually, it flowered last year, and it had come up and looked good and actually had a flower that got this far open, and then it just stopped and went brown. Ben, who's really into lilies, was concerned that maybe a rodent got at it underground and excavated around the bulb a bit. And the bulb is fully intact, as are the roots. So why it decided to do this, who knows? We do have lilies that do that from time to time. And then we even have lilies that take a year off completely. And I'm speaking strictly genus Lilium. There's a Lilium Humboldtii that's outside my office window, and that it's a big one. And that last year it didn't come up at all. And we all thought, oh, well, must have rotted off or something ate it, or who knows, because it's not in an area that gets a lot of attention, even though it's right outside my window. But then this year it's back and it's full size again. Who knows why or how some of these plants do what they do. We also know that a lot of fritillarias can be completely dormant for multiple years and then show up again. A lot of our geophytes, we really don't know how old they really get. I mean, I remember in Fermantia when I was editor and published that special Chaparral issue that included an article about then zigadines or toxoscordions that they were saying were easily 75 years old, the plants in the Chaparral. And again, I'm sure that there are some that are much older. And that they can just be there waiting for conditions to be right, and that they don't even necessarily have to put up a resting leaf. Who knows? But yes, we do have Bolanderi. Yes, we do have rubescens. We don't have Washingtonianum, but we did a seed collection of it, and those are coming along. The other project I should mention that were our next project is working on the garden's 3 entrances, and particularly the 2 off of Anzaview Road. We had a large shore pine at our back service gate, which is right kind of at the edge of the conifer wall, and actually was one of the few that was actually on in the south of that road service entrance. It died last summer and was removed. And so it had taken up so much space and so on that there wasn't much important left in that bed, and it's a large bed. So we propagated what was there and are now going to do another major rock garden there, probably of some sort of sandstone or some sort of shale.
Constant activity, plans and things moving on there. That's excellent. Well, for everyone still with us here, I want you to go into your reactions and get those 3 dots and find the reactions, or just wave your hands, give a big thank you, or the reaction claps. There we go. I see it. A lot of you know where to go to for the claps. Oh, and then some confetti there coming up. Some New Year's type reactions. Very good. And waving hands. Good crowd. That's what we want. Okay. Just want to let everyone know field trips are back. So if you go to our homepage, OCCNPS, there are a few more spots left there. And then we have a few more of the books that are done by Bart O'Brien and Carol Bornstein and David Fross. So still things to do to finish out your night. Otherwise, we'll probably be taking a siesta over the summer. Dan, do you want to give us any hints that what might be coming this fall? And then I think we're done for the night.
No hints.
Okay.
I'm still struggling with a few possibilities. It'll be fun.
Okay, very good. Well then, everyone, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Bart. Thank you, Carol, who's still with us too. And we hope to see you next fall or at the field trips.
Oh, I should have said that last year our Bolanders lily had 3 fully open flowers. So it was spectacular. And I did have photos, but I didn't include them tonight.
All right.
Good finish.
You're forgiven, Bart.
Thank you all. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks, Bart.
So long, everyone.
Yep. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Great to see you, Bart.
Oh, wonderful to be here.
It's like we're dropping quickly. Oh, down to 20 people. Still dropping. Yep. Okay, in total, we were right at about 100 people tonight. Thank you.
Oh, really? Great.
Yeah, that was a good show. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.